All right, so it's 2:08 p.m. on May 11th, 2022, and the recording is started. So we'll just give it a couple more minutes, see if anybody else trickles in, and then we'll get started. All right, it's about 10 minutes after 2 o'clock. We were scheduled to start at 2 p.m. From 2 to 4 was our scheduled meeting today. I guess we can go ahead and get started. We can go ahead and do a roll call. I know there's not a lot of us here. Nikki, would you prefer to do that, or would you like me to do it?
Sorry, looking for my unmute. I would prefer for you to do it.
Okay, no problem, no problem.
Thank you, Nate.
All right. Yeah, of course, anytime. So we'll just go ahead and go alphabetically by last name. So Nicole Bailey. It does not look like she is present. Andrea Chirivogaflor. Also looks like she is not present. John Connolly.
Here.
Is here. Captain Dittman.
Good afternoon, I'm here.
Okay, great, thank you. Trevor Forbes, the chair. Does not look like he is present. Similarly, Troy Hill also looks like he is not present. Jim Howes also looks like he is not present. Nicole Lawless.
I am here.
Michael Pierce. He is here. Oh, you're on mute. Sorry, I didn't see you.
Yes, here. Sorry.
I do see you, so that's good.
Yeah.
Officer Prunsky.
I'm here.
And glad to see you. Brandon Rich is not present. He's one of the ones I got the email from, I think a couple days ago. He said he was going to be 30 minutes late, so we'll expect him to be coming in at some point. But for now, we'll mark him as not present. Jeffrey Reister, I also saw a decline to the invite just earlier today, so I'm assuming he will not be present, so we'll mark him as not present. Nathan Riley, that's myself, I am here, and Joyanne Narusha. I see you. I believe we can mark her as present.
Oh, yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you. Wonderful. Okay, that's the whole roll. We also have John Roberts, the Attorney General. He is here with us as well, listening in. Appreciate that. Just FYI, so like I said, Brandon Rich, he let me know he was going to be 30 minutes late. Captain Dittman said he was double booked, but it looks like he is here. That's great. Jeffrey Reister declined the invite. So we'll see if he shows up, but it doesn't look like it. Couple administrative things before we jump into conversation. First off, we did have one sign up today for public comment by the name of Preston Haynes, Haynes. Indicated they would like to join the meeting and provide public comment. In the brief description of public comment, noted about the new bill in the House. So I'm assuming he's referring to the towing legislation, which, for if anybody doesn't know, actually just passed the House on concurrent repass. So it is headed to the governor's office. Moving along in administrative, just wanted to remind everybody, if you could please fill out and sign those compliance affidavits that I sent out after our last meeting. A few of you have done that, and I appreciate that. Let's see, who has done it? Hold on, I have like 20 windows open here. Here we go. So it looks like Captain Dittman sent his in, thank you. Joyanne as well, thank you. Brandon Rich sent his in, thank you. And Nikki Lawless also sent hers, thank you to the four of you for sending those in. Anybody who has not done so, if you could please look at that. Again, the email I sent out was, I think, within a few days of our last meeting, which was back on the 13th of April. Again, if you could please sign those and return those. It's basically just indicating that you're agreeing that we've onboarded you into your role on the towing task force. The department has. So that's something they're requiring us to do on the department level. I then take that affidavit and link it into the department documentation just to make sure that we have that record for you. So yeah, if you could all please do that. If you have not done so already, I would really appreciate that. If you have any questions about it, you can always reach out to me. That's fine. Okay, let's see. So again, there's not really any agenda today, so I wasn't sure. I guess we'll just open it up for anything anybody wants to talk about. I have a couple items on my list that I wanted to talk about, but I can go at the end if anybody else has anything they want to bring up or to start talking about. Mr. Conley.
I'll just do the public comment.
So somebody signed up, but I don't see them in here. So I know we had mentioned in our last meeting that we wanted to try doing public comment on the front end instead of the back end. And I'm supportive of that if we want to try that out and see how it goes. But there's nobody here but us. So yeah, no, I'd love to jump right into it, but it looks like who signed up or anyone else for that matter is not here. It looks like the only people in here right now are members of the towing task force and the AG. So obviously, if they jump in, we can go right to that if that's what everybody's comfortable with. But yeah, we'll wait and see if they jump in. Again, the link to this meeting is right there in the notice, as well as the link to this sign up form. So again, I would assume they would know just to jump in if they were going to participate. So we'll see.
I saw an agenda that Trevor sent out.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I did not see one. I mean, there's a chance he might have sent one out and I didn't see it. Maybe he didn't include me on the email, but I did not see one. If there is one.
I have not seen one, but I haven't been receiving them anyway.
Okay.
I think it was just basics, approved minutes from last month and open discussion.
Okay. Oh yeah, that's a good idea. We probably should approve the minutes. I know we have a pretty small group here, but I don't think it would be an issue for us to approve the minutes unless AG Roberts has some concerns with us doing that with a smaller amount of the body.
No, this is John. I'm having camera problems, so you guys can see Dave Mason here as my icon instead of my face. But yeah, no problem with that, Nate.
Okay. Okay. Let's go ahead. I assume everybody saw them. So do we have a motion to approve the minutes for the April 13th Towing Task Force meeting?
I'll make the motion.
Okay. John Conley makes the motion. I'm sorry, I heard a second. Where did it come from?
That's from me, Mike.
Okay. And Dr. Pierce seconds that motion. Do we have any opposition to passing or approving the minutes as presented? Okay, seeing none, the minutes from our last meeting on April 13th are approved. I will make sure after this meeting to go ahead and get those uploaded to our website so that people can see them. Yeah, no, I thought they looked pretty good from what I saw. Thank you, Nikki, for putting that together. Okay. Well, yeah, some of the things I wanted to bring up, I don't know how useful it'll be with such a small congregation of us. Just so all of you know, this is something I've been thinking about bringing up for a while now. And I did want to go ahead and bring it up. I think we need to have more people be part of the discussion to make this kind of a decision. But given that we are essentially going to put a report together that's going to be submitted to the PUC that essentially has the towing task force stamp of approval, more or less, because it's what we're going to be submitting as a body to the PUC to consider when it comes to towing rates. I did kind of want for us to, as a body, explore whether or not we want to make it a criteria for whatever is in that report to be submitted to the PUC to be submitted basically under the blanket of a supermajority within the body. Obviously, there's going to be things that we don't always agree with when we're talking about some of these points. I think we've seen that in some of the meetings we've had so far. And so, whatever gets submitted to the PUC that basically is coming from the task force as a whole, I just was wondering if maybe we want to make it so that whatever is in that report has the backing of a supermajority. So, 2/3 of everybody involved in the task force, as opposed to just a simple, maybe 7 people agree with it and 5 don't, So anyway, that's something I'll be floating. Again, this is probably not the best time to do it when we only have a handful of us here. But I just so you all know, that is something I'm going to be bringing up to discuss when we have more people to discuss it. Because yeah.
I'm sorry. I can't. If I wave my hand, you can't see me. My camera is not working either.
Well, you can always do the little button to raise your hand, though. I'll hear and see that. If you do that.
All right. I'll raise. I'll be more polite and raise my hand.
Of course. What's up, Joanne?
I have a clarifying question. So for our report, is that also considered the same as a recommendation?
Well, it's comprehensive recommendations is what it is. So yeah, if you look at 4010.14035, it's under A, it says, so the towing task force has the following duties and powers: to make comprehensive recommendations to the commission about the maximum rates that may be charged for recovery, towing, and storage of a vehicle that has been towed without the owner's consent. So, I mean, it comes in a report format, but they are recommendations.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that when you're talking about a supermajority, we're also talking about our recommendations. And can you remind us when the due date for this report?
So that was another thing I wanted to talk about, and I wanted to commend the towing task force and its members for kind of, not bringing up or being too eager to discuss obviously what's been going on in legislation, but we've even passed some votes where we've basically agreed to stay on track on what the statute is having us do. I do think it's important to note, though, that one of the kind of end of the line changes they did make to the legislation was to 4010.1403. So what it did is expand what the towing task force should be looking at or has to look at when it comes to these recommendations. The recommendations are still there. The two things it looks like it expanded were, one, the due date of that first report, which I think is a good idea. If they're going to be adding new things for us to look at, we need more time to look at it. And so it would expand. And again, this is just as it is now. It's my understanding that today the bill did pass the House after coming back from the Senate with amendments, and they voted to concur and repass. I'm pretty sure I saw that. And actually, I got a message from our director that had happened.
Yes, you're correct.
So it is going to the governor's office. I mean, there's always a chance you could see a veto, so that's always a possibility, in which case the whole thing could just fall flat. But I think that's unlikely, but we'll see what happens. But no, one of the things that they changed was the due date of the report. And again, the reason I bring this up is because, Joyanne, you just mentioned it. As of right now, the statute gives us until no later than September 1st of 2022 to produce that recommendation to the PUC. Based on the changes to the legislation, it would extend that deadline from September 1st to November 1st of this year. So an extra 2 months for us to put those recommendations together, which again, I think is helpful, especially if they're adding new things for us to look at. And that's the other thing they changed, or again, as it's presented, and if it passes, if it's signed, the other thing they're going to do is include for us as a body to analyze and make recommendations to the commission about non-consensual tow rates, which is something we're already doing, to the public. But then it further explains, in analyzing non-consensual tow rates, the task force shall take into account current consensual towing market rates and their relationship to non-consensual towing rates. So again, how we would do that, I'm sure people have better ideas than I do about how we might do that. The other thing to think about is, even if this bill passes as is, and again, say the governor signs it or it becomes law, there is a petition, or what do they call it? An act subject to petition, which means the bill actually doesn't become effective until 90 days after adjournment. So we have 3 more months. The adjournment is today of the legislature. So that would mean we'd have another 90 days. We'd have to wait before this is actually effective statutory law. And the changes they are proposing here would become effective. So again, I think, I'm not sure the best way to do that, if we should just plan that it's gonna go through and it won't fall flat at the end somehow.
I have an opinion on that, Nate.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
First, it's after July 1st, and then November 1st on the deadline. But I think that's a great idea to look at the consensual rates and why the consensual rates are where they are versus non-consent rates. I think that's something that we should do as a body, anyway. And with it being in this bill, I think that's even better. I don't foresee that coming out, to be honest with you.
Okay. Yeah, and again, it's not going to change, because again, it's already been passed in the houses, so either it'll be vetoed or not. And even if it gets vetoed, there's always a chance it goes back to the House and Senate and they repass it with 2/3, in which case it would override the veto. So I mean, I think it's a very good chance it's going to go through as is, with it not falling flat. So, and again, the only reason we're talking about this at all is because, again, it does have an impact on 4010.1403, which is our statute that creates this towing task force and tells us what we're supposed to do. So again, that does impact us, and so we have to discuss it and be prepared for this additional criteria that they're implementing here. So, I saw. Oh, sorry, that was a. Okay. So yeah, Joyanne was just indicating that we should be prepared for that, which I agree. Michael?
Yeah, so not only is the task force charged with comparing regular rates, but I thought there's a section in the legislation. I've only just now tried to become more thoroughly acquainted with it, but I think it demands that the non-consensual rates are comparable to consensual rates. I forget the exact language. So it seems like our mandate as a task force is to come up with rates that are grounded in consensual rates.
No, that part was taken out.
Yeah, no, yes, it was. And I think that's why they put something similar to it in the towing task force statute, is so that even though they took that particular provision out of the towing statutes, the operational statutes that towing carriers have to adhere to, they put it somewhere else. So it's like that particular aspect that they wanted to put in the bill is still being explored, but instead of just making it a mandate that towing carriers have to follow, instead they're just going to have us explore it, which I think is fine. That seemed like a good compromise.
Oh, yeah, because they were confused on the reasons why, this body here has a much more effective way of looking at that and understanding the differences and why the differences are the way they are.
Okay, so just to be clear, so that we have the right document to reference, I downloaded and I'm not sure if I read the wrong copy, but I downloaded the draft that was, let's see, let me see where I got it from.
Yeah, the last version was on May 9th. That was the latest version of the copy of the bill. And it does include that new towing task force language in it. It's on, hold on, page, I just had it up.
Okay.
I can tell you what page of the bill it's on.
Page
if you want
15.
it. Is it 15?
In the pre-amended, it's page 15. It's been in there for quite a while.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You're correct. The most latest version, again on 5.9, which you can get off the legislature's website, is the changes to 4010.1403 start on the bottom of page 15 and extend into page 17, where it talks about the changes to the towing task force. Most of the changes they're making are actually to the PUC and the report we have to give on an annual basis. But they did include some changes also to the towing task force, which starts at the very bottom of page 16 and extends into 17. So if you want to take a look at that, feel free to do so.
Okay, so just to be clear, it's the 5.9 version is the one that actually got out of that was voted on today, and that we can reference.
Yeah, I believe so, because I think that's the amended draft from the Senate that they put together to send over to the House. So that was the most compiled version of the bill, because it's been changed so many times in the last 3
It has 30 some amendments. So yeah,
That is correct.
it's kind of a shit sandwich. As soon as we get the finished copy, I think that's something that we can all take a look at then.
Yeah, once there's a final act, which they'll put together, because they're going to have to put it together and sign it, by certain leadership at the legislature have to sign it before it can go over to the governor's office. So for signature. So anyway, that'll be coming here, I'm sure, shortly. But like I said, we should probably plan on that, because I think it's a very low chance that this bill isn't going to be signed and become law. So we just have to be prepared for that. Again, it does increase our mandate, where we'd have to, again, have more thorough discussions and probably maybe even, acquire data. I'm not sure in what way that is most appropriate to kind of identify consensual towing rates. I mean, the non-consensual towing rates are easy. We can just see those on the PUC's website. They're all right there, what they are. And we can go back a couple stages, a couple effective series of rates to kind of see where it's trended. And I think some of that information is also in the primer that was circulated on what rates, at what intervals rates have, gone up a little bit. I remember the PPI hook fees being 180 when I first started, I think back in 2012. So obviously they're more now than they were then, but I always felt like it's not by a lot, because again, if it was 180 back 10 years ago, and now it's what, 211, so it's gone up $30 in 10 years. I mean, that's just one fee, but anyway, it's something to think about.
Well, the easiest way is when we're talking about non-consent and you're looking at everything that creates the costs for non-consent towing. All you do is eliminate the things you need in non-consent that you don't need in consent towing. And you eliminate those costs, and that pretty much puts you where your consent towing is. So we can kind of take the math backwards, eliminate the insurance in the yards, eliminate the properties, the impound facilities, the staff, eliminate the 24-hour, crews that you have to have running for that. You start eliminating the costs that you need for non-consent towing, and that puts you in your consent rates. And that basic math will take you right where the consent rates are.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, John, and I don't. Again, I haven't seen the numbers, but I'm a little inclined to agree that's probably a pretty fair comparison, because the biggest thing I'm thinking of is storage. For consensual, tows, I'm guessing there's not a lot of instances where storage is necessary, because again, you're probably just, you know, towing somebody, you know, who broke down on the side of the road back to their house, or to the, you know, the mechanic, or, you know, wherever they want you to take it. And so obviously you're not going to see, as of right now, you know, that storage fee is at $40, at least for non-consensual tows. It's around $40 a day. And so obviously that's $40 less you're going to see each day, you know, obviously that it stays in there. So, you know, if a vehicle's in there for 48 hours, that's $80 right there, that a consensual a tow is not going to see, just because, again, it didn't go to the storage facility, it went somewhere else.
Sure.
But I get to what you're saying, John. That's a good point. Joanne.
Hey, so I know last time that you guys had discussed reviewing rates and like tracking against the CPI. But I heard what you just said, John, about like subtracting A from B. But is it worth it to just start over in assessing the costs? And I bring this up because we've also, I think in the last 10 years, had a lot of changes in the industry. Like my understanding is that it's consolidated quite a bit. And so that might change some of the costs because there's economies of scale.
How do you mean consolidated?
On the on the non-consensual side, like if if we have fewer operators than we did 10 years ago, the costs might be different.
Yeah, the operators have pretty much been about the same in the last decade. It ranges around 700 tow carriers, about 200. Nate, correct me if I'm wrong. It's about 200 go out of business and 200 go in business.
On the non-consensual side?
Well, it's generally across the board as far as permits. That's about the only way to track it.
So John, you're saying how much do the permits cost for towing?
No, how many tow carriers, right? So if you have 700 tow carriers averaged every year with valid permits, that number fluctuates around the 700 range, and it goes about 200 new permits and 200 go out of business every year. And that's been that way for the last decade.
Are non-consensual towing carriers.
Well, the problem is that's the other issues. There is no, when you become a carrier, there is no boundary. You can do anything you want to do. You can be a consent carrier, a non-consent carrier, or both. There is no specific permit for a non-consent carrier versus a consent carrier. It's just what you have to be a non-consent carrier.
Okay, so once you become a towing operator, you're authorized to do non-consensual tows as long as you stay in the rules then.
Yes.
So
Sorry, you're authorized to do any kind of tow. And that's the thing. They're statewide permits. And basically, you now are permitted to perform pretty much any towing activity you can think of, short of like repossessions, because that's not regulated by the PUC. But no, this permit allows you to do law enforcement order tows. It allows you to do consensual tows or non-consensual tows. Those are the three main categories of tows. And again, like John said, he's right. It's not specific. It's just a towing permit. And so it allows you to do any of those things to fit your business model, whatever that might be.
Okay, so Nate, do you have a way of, guesstimating with the data that your office has, like how many towing operators do non-consensual tows? Is there any way of knowing?
No,
No.
we don't track that. It's the towing permits allows them to do any type of towing, regulated towing operation that they want. That's not something we ask them when they come in. We don't say, oh, are you going to be doing non-consensual or law enforcement? We don't ask. Sometimes they tell us what they're doing, but we don't track that data.
Yeah. No, I understand. I didn't know if there was just something on the back end that would have created some flag for you, whether it was insurance requirement or some filing or, any other way to know. But
and like John said earlier, there are hybrid towing carriers that do both. So like you might have a towing carrier that does some non-consensual towing and does law enforcement as well. Or maybe you do all three. Maybe you do some law enforcement, some consensual, some non-consensual. Maybe you do just consensual. So maybe you do just non-consensual. It's all across the board.
Got it. Then I guess my follow-up was, in the last time we did the survey, I say we loosely even though I wasn't here. But last time we did this survey, do you guys remember how many operators responded? Survey about like costs and overhead.
It wasn't a lot. It wasn't as many as we wanted. It was about 60, I think 60 companies that gave information. A lot of it is no one wants to give their company information into the public, right? It's like a P&L. I mean, I would be more than happy to give my P&L to the board, but that's something you don't want to put out into the public because then your competition can take advantage of you, right? So there's that fine line there of what information do you give out versus what you keep at heart. So
Understood.
but so what we did is what we went through and we figured out, not everybody has brand new trucks. Not everybody has old trucks. So we basically just came up with costs. We went with 3-year-old trucks. We went with middle-sized companies, not one truck operations, not 50 truck operations. And we just started looking at costs, how much for an acre of land in different counties, zone for storage of motor vehicles, basic costs for employees. And we basically just went through and we did an entire list of costs, what a tower has of costs. And then once those costs were figured out, they put in a 12% profit margin because there's so much fluctuation in loss that in non-consent towing that you don't see. A lot of people think non-consent towing is someone who just parked illegally real quick and they're going to come pick their car up. And they forget about all of the others that are just abandoned junk, abandoned motorhomes, abandoned cars, just stuff that is junked and left. And the tower is responsible to tow it out of there and then file on it and process it and haul it off to the crusher. And so there's loss. Well, those losses change per company and I mean, per month it can change. I mean, I can do in my company alone, and here's where I can give you lots of what goes on in my company. We can have months where we do 100 junkers to crushers, and then we could have months where we do 200. Those months vary, and it really just depends on what's going on in the law enforcement. It depends on what's going on in the apartment complexes. Are people abandoning junk, or you don't know? And that's the hardest part, trying to figure out cost to towers, is the loss. Trying to come across the board and one Band-Aid fits all. The cost that I may have here in Denver may not be the same losses in Pueblo or Yuma, or I mean, it changes so drastically from each county and each section of the state. It's very, very hard to figure cost and loss. So that 12% is, to me, is not 12%, but someone else it may be. So that's the biggest challenge, is trying to come up with rates, is analyzing the losses, because just like any other business, losses have to be passed on to the consumer. They just do.
And that 12% profit margin, that is something that the towing task force came up with when you did this survey, correct?
That was a general PUC regulation style. Most states and their regulatory agencies give a certain percent of profit, so that way there is a healthy industry. So like Nate, you could probably talk about Excel and the rest, and I mean, they have a certain profit margin they put into everybody that's regulated.
But is that something that that we have in rules right now, or is that something that the task force built into their model?
The task force just added it to their model because that's what was the general back then.
Okay, got it. And then I was gonna maybe our attorney general can answer the question, but as far as like what's courtable or what is considered potentially confidential, is there anything that a business, if they were responding to this survey, like that would be kept from Cora because it would be like sensitive. Someone step in and save me from myself. I hope you know what I'm trying to say. Like,
Here,
you know what I
I'll put it. I can put it in layman's terms because I'm rough around the edges. If I submit my P&L to the board, can we keep it private within the board, or does that go to the public?
This is John. Generally, if an agency comes into possession of a document or creates a document, it is defined broadly as a public record. So, and that's the baseline default approach or position on any documents that a state agency has. Now that it may be protected from disclosure to the public, but it would have to fall under one of a number, and there's like 15 or 16 different categories of reasons we could protect documents that the state has. So I would have to look at what the documents are and then see if it fits under the heading of one of those categories.
Okay.
What about redaction?
Redaction is always an option in my experience. Redaction usually sends up more red flags than it's worth to protect, because when someone sees a sheaf of papers, 10 pages and half of it is blacked out, that just makes them want more. It's like, what are you hiding from me? I'm going to make another Cora request, or I'm going to take this to a district court.
Okay, that makes thanks. That makes sense. I just we don't want to keep things from the public eye that the public has a right to know if they make the inquiry, but I didn't know if there was if there was something there to look at.
It's possible. There are a couple categories that address companies' proprietary information, and the information we're talking about very well could fall under proprietary. If we have a sample of the kind of information we're talking about, I'm happy to look at it. That doesn't constitute falling into that doesn't constitute a public record, because it's between you, my client, and me, your attorney. So that's part of the attorney-client privilege. I could look at it and evaluate whether it would fall into one of those categories.
Okay.
I was curious.
Here's what worries me. Oh, sorry, Michael, go ahead.
Just following up on Joya's questions. I'm curious if there's a way that we can do just summary statistics without revealing the source surveys, because that's common in all kinds of other areas as well. Like when you're asking for people to report their incomes, other sensitive private information, it's relatively common in all kinds of contexts to not reveal personal information, but to reveal summary statistics. So just curious if we can get away with that with Cora.
Yeah, I think we could, as long as we don't have, we being the PUC or the task force doesn't have possession of the underlying documents. If we have them, we can't say we don't, sort of. Well, not sort of, in fact.
Here's what worries me a little bit, just because let's assume we get the extension in time to put this all together. We need this information. The information from the previous, and I pulled up the last, well, I don't know if it was the last, but it's the primary towing task force recommendations that were submitted back in 2016, from the primer that we all have, that got circulated before. I think it was our second meeting back in February. And I'm seeing a lot of the stuff that John was talking about, like the information included in the model that allots for it looks like a 12.5 profit, reasonable profit margin for the towing industry is how it's defined. And then there's a little identifier here for loss costs, advertising, taxes, employee costs, licenses, administrative costs, management costs. All these things were included in the model at that time. And so, obviously this information's pretty old, going up on 7 years now or so. And I don't think it would hurt to get some updated information to kind of see if where the fees are now line up with, you know, kind of what was put together in this model. But I feel like what we put together in the recommendation has to be based off of something. And the sooner we get that information, the better, because it'll give us more time to look it over, and really, you know, analyze it and decide if everything's lining up with what it is now, or if we need to make some adjustments backwards or forwards, whatever the case may be. But yeah, no, I do think we have to get moving, because again, even anticipating we get that extension, we're still talking about, you know, less than 7 months before it's due. And you know, 6+ months sounds like a lot of time, but I mean, we're only meeting once a month, and I don't really think anybody's doing anything in the background, you know, in regards to what our responsibilities are here. So yeah, I just worry about running out of time, and obviously we got to submit the report or the recommendations to the PUC when we got to submit them, and you know, they're going to be what they are, but I personally would like to see them be as thorough and as thought out as possible. And so, you know, I do think we have to get moving on getting some of this information. I think, and again, I'm not sure the best way to do that, but
Hey, Nate,
yeah, go ahead.
not to interrupt. Why don't we just start off just like we did on the first go around with the task force? We just start getting costs. So I believe we have an insurance guy in the group who did this last time. He represents insurance groups. He can figure out how much it is to insure a tow truck. So he can get those costs. We can get a hold of the towing manufacturers, and we can get the current price on the equipment. We can go through the counties, get current land values of what properties are that are, you know, for storage, and we'll just start getting all the costs that are out there and bring them to the table, and then we can start analyzing that. I can tell you that the CPI increase only has really affected your personnel. It really hasn't gone into any of the things like the stuff that really kills the industry. You know, when you start looking at wages, things like that, CPI kind of covers that okay. But as far as equipment and other things, insurance, it doesn't take an effect on those. So, I mean, those are things we can do to help with that. Get the ball rolling.
Yeah, and I like the idea of kind of breaking out everything, because obviously a lot of us have a lot of different expertise. Like you mentioned, you know, we have Jim Howes, who's, you know, on the insurance side of things. So I would imagine he probably would be best to get that information together. You know, I'm not sure what resources he could do to put that together, but basically, you know, put all that, a good chunk of data together to kind of give an idea of, you know, where the prices are across the board in regards to insurance rates for towing carriers. And then, you know, similarly, you know, I can weigh in on a couple different things, like, you know, permitting was one of the things on this list. I obviously can fill in, you know, what's going on in that regard. Let's see. Yeah, business licenses. Let's see. Yeah, insurance, losses, and obviously we have John Conley is here. He is part of a tow company, so he has access to some of that data on, you know, things like employee costs and administrative costs, things like that. Trevor Forbes, same thing. I wasn't sure how far out we wanted to go. You know, if we wanted to, again, send out some kind of an official notice or something, basically saying, you know, please give us some data in regards to, you know, some of these items and how much it costs you, and we can again splice it all together and get a better idea of some averages of, you know, what it costs to run a tow company.
Sure.
Officer Brinsky.
Yeah, I like the survey idea, Nate. I think just the issue is, John had mentioned earlier, a lot of companies don't want to give up all their information. I think if we did that survey, we just got to figure out how to either do the anonymous survey or, you know, bite the bullet on doing the redaction. Because, I mean, cops, we like redaction.
John, how did it happen last time? Like how did, because you said 60 people responded to what?
So what we did
Yeah.
is we took the PUC mailing list, the email list. Sorry, my brain's fried today. And we put it together a questionnaire. We put what their average consent tow rate was, what their average mileage rate was, their consent rates versus their non-consent rates. We had all that information. We tried to also put how many tows they did in a month to try to kind of narrow that down. It's like, in Yuma, they might do one non-consent tow versus Denver, they could do 60, right? Or 100, or that there's so much vast difference across the state. So we had a sheet that we sent out. We gave them I want to say it was 4 or 6 weeks to get the information back. And at that time, I think we got, like I said, it was just shy of 60 or just over 60. It wasn't much. Out of 700, we were very disappointed.
Yeah, and I could see something similar happening. Now that I'm thinking about it, I can't imagine we can make this an anonymous survey, just because I feel like we have to tie it back to something, because I mean, there's always that possibility that somebody could, come up with a whole bunch of fake email addresses and submit that their, prices are sky high, then we're using inflated data. I definitely don't want to fall into that trap. Yeah, I mean, I could see that if we did it the same way, where essentially we're asking them to submit that information with no particular expectation of privacy. Yeah, we are going to get less input, but at the same time, I'm sure there'd be, 60 carriers who would be willing to bite that bullet and say, here's my data, what can you do for us?
There's also something State Patrol can do, like for law enforcement, and State Patrol helped us on this last go around, is to tow for State Patrol, you have to register your rates with the patrol. And so the patrol actually has rates, which is public record already, of every tow company and what their rates are with the patrol. So that kind of helped out in the law enforcement area. So we could probably have, one of our officers here do that.
Yeah, we could look into that. I think though, looking back, that the rates varied quite a bit then, but now that they're controlled by PUC, the maximum rates anyway, I don't know. I'm happy to look into it. I just don't know how much disparity we're going to see. I would imagine that most folks are charging pretty close to the high end or the maximum rates that are allowed.
Yeah. I see Brandon came in. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming. Just so you know, we're discussing potential ways we could try to aggregate some data in regards to what tow carriers the operating costs are and things of that nature. So just so you know, that's what we're talking about. Joyanne?
Hey, so I pulled up the report from that study, and I'm gonna just go ahead and say it again. I think we should start over, or just with a clean slate and evaluating rates. I'm seeing that some things we took from Utah study, some things we took from the task force, some from survey, and I think that we already have kind of a formula to work with, or a running head start on the things we want to evaluate. But I think that it would be good for us and also good for the public if we just if we kind of wiped it clean. I mean, I'm seeing some stuff that we borrowed from Utah. For example, it says from the Utah study, a business manager cost was, inclusive of benefits, $95,000 a year. And there are some other things that might seem arbitrary to us. Also, the notification fees. I know that by law, Utah maxes it at $36. Ours is $115. It's about to go down to $75 if the governor signs this bill. So I think we should, kind of keep the framework that we have, maybe add or subtract if the group, agrees that it's necessary, but that we just, gather new data. And I also think that when, we're looking at whatever sample we get, I think we should also just consider the size of the company, right? So if we get, like the top 5 largest towing companies that respond, I think that's really useful data. But if we're not getting, companies either like that are smaller or maybe from rural areas, that can also throw our numbers off as well, because they're going to have different cost factors. And that's it.
Okay.
That was my thoughts. Sorry.
Oh, thanks, Joanne. Michael?
I was just curious if we have a budget of any kind, because one option would be, one kind of workaround would be to hire an organization to do the polling for us, and by doing that, just from hearing John's comments, if we have the data in hand, it's going to be hard for us to get around Quora. But if another company is doing the surveying that we contract with, then they can provide us with a summary report. So I'm curious if that's an option for us.
Yeah, it's my understanding we have no funding. There's not any provision that I'm aware of that gives us that. Obviously, we have the support from the department and from the AG's office, in making sure we are able to do what we need to do per the statute and what our body is supposed to do. So yeah, we do have that support. But in regards to this kind of thing, I think that's, again, what we're supposed to be doing. I think we're the ones who are responsible for figuring out how to aggregate the data and then putting it all together and then sorting through it and analyzing it and putting together some kind of a cogent report, which then becomes recommendations to the commission. That's all our responsibility, is my understanding of how it works. I'm sure John can probably back that up from his previous experience on the board.
Yeah, my experience was not very good with PUC after that, because we put in a year's worth of work and then the PUC didn't take our recommendation and dissected it for a year only to go back to our recommendation. So it was kind of disheartening at first, but I mean, I'm glad it ended up where it did. I'm with Joanne. If you guys want to, we can dissect it all over again, because honestly, the rates are too low for cost. I mean, there's been massive increases. I bought a brand new truck February, and they just delivered it to me last Friday. And they called me yesterday and told me there's a $6,500 tariff being put on all vehicles across the board. So every new truck automatically has $6,500 tariff on it. So, I mean, they just went up $6,500 in 2 months. Back when we did the study, brand new trucks were, 80,000, 85,000. Now they're 125 to 135,000 for them little trucks. So, yeah, I mean, it's brutal. I mean, insurance back in the day, when we did the study, my insurance was 190,000, went to 650 just for my truck liability. So I'm more than happy to dissect all those numbers again. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I do think the thing is we need the numbers. And so I think, any way we think is the best way to put that all together, whether it's using the same method as before, I'm happy to, I don't foresee any issue with me putting together and getting to the task force the information to send out a notice like that to all the towing carriers. As of today, it looks like we have 739 active towing carriers. So again, it as John said earlier, it does kind of range in that 700, between 700 and 800. I've seen it, up towards 800, like 789. I saw, a while back. So yeah, it tends to stay within that 700 to 800 range of carriers, active carriers at any given time. So that's a lot of carriers to reach out to and make that request. I don't think it's unreasonable to request a 4 to 6 week turnaround on the carriers that would like to provide us that data. them putting it together. I'm not sure what the questionnaire looked like last time. I think that's something we would have to put together during a meeting like this. I don't think, I honestly don't think it can wait past us sending something like that out past whatever our next scheduled meeting is. I really do think we have to we have to get this data, because again, it's going to take a lot of work to pour over it all and aggregate it all and put it all together. And again, let people look at it, let us all talk about it and think about it, and you know, start coming up with some reasonable ideas of, you know, what the rates can be.
Nate, do we have the original survey? I can see the report, but is that something that Dora would have?
I can look for it. The previous chief had a towing task force folder that I have access to.
It used to be on a cloud.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking in that folder, and I'm not seeing something that looks like that, but I can look more closely and see if there's something that that does that. You said something about a cloud.
Yeah, there was it was on in the cloud. I remember that's how we accessed it, and Mr. Jack had that. And then once the task force was pretty much shut off, it all went dormant, and then there was no access anymore.
Yeah, I can ask one of our deputy directors if maybe they can look for it, or maybe I can look.
There was an actual spreadsheet where it had categories, and you just put the numbers into the categories, and then automatically added it up, figured out everything. It was an entire spreadsheet that did it automatically. So as we got data in, we put it in, and then we got to the end of it. Then we dissected it. We moved numbers around because it was pretty high, because we had like the cost of new trucks in there. So then we took new trucks out, and we went, okay, let's go with a 3-year-old truck, which, you know, depreciation, things like that. And we kind of started dissecting it down and try really fine tuning it a bit. The problem is anybody can shoot holes through any data you get, right? So we have to do the best we can with the data we can get.
And I'm wondering if you know, there's 700 providers. I mean, I don't know if you guys are able to identify them by size or anything like that. And based on the responses you get, I mean, it maybe makes sense as if, you know, up front, there's a certain percentage or certain amount that we want to, you know, include. So you're not trying to, you know, load all this data in there and you randomly pick a certain percentage. So, you know, you're represented by, you know, 30% of the carriers or something like that, instead of trying to put in. I'm assuming if you do a request to all of them, you know, you're probably going to get a certain response rate, whether that's 50% or something, but 350 carriers would still be a lot of data to try to dissect and normalize. So I wonder if it's better just to try to figure out a percentage that we want to get.
Okay. I'll start looking for that kind of thing. You know, it's especially, yeah, if you say there was a spreadsheet, I'll reach out and see if maybe people remember where that might be. I'll look for it myself as well. We do keep a lot online, you know, through things like Google Drive and things like that. So I can check through that. I've actually been scrolling through here looking for something like that. I haven't seen it, but it doesn't mean it's not here. Maybe I'm just not seeing it. But I'll look for that, because yeah, that it sounds like that would save us a lot of work if we are able to, if we've already done the legwork, or the task force already did the legwork years ago to create some kind of a, you know, data sorting mechanism. We definitely want to try to find that and use that, so that we don't have to recreate something. So that could save us a lot of time. Yeah.
I put in the proceeding number in Dora's search feature, and I think I've actually found the document you're referencing. It just happens to be a PDF and not an Excel file. But there were a lot of submissions, including from the task force. So if you don't have the originals, at least there are some PDFs online that are still public facing. And I put it in the chat, everyone. So I'll also put the link in case anyone wants to search independently later, how you can find that information.
Yeah, and all that information is again available on our website through the e-filings feature. You can access any PUC proceeding that way, and go in and take a look at all this stuff. Again, the primer we circulated prior to the second meeting does have kind of outline the different proceedings that have constituted the rulemakings the PUC has done over the years. So of course, we would encourage you to look at those and kind of see what the process looks like, and what kind of information has been considered in some of these cases. So.
Could we move this into an agenda item for next meeting, if possible? It's just have it scheduled so that we have, say, a survey we can look at and maybe some of the data.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good idea to do that. I think we can do a little bit of legwork. I got a couple things that I'm going to be looking into in the interim, in between meetings, to try to see if some of this work we're talking about has already been done, and would give us an easier time putting it all together. But yeah, like I said, I definitely think that at the very latest, we should put something together to solicit data, probably no later than whatever our next meeting is, which I'm guessing is going to be in June. I think we definitely have to start, putting, at least, get the clock running on whatever amount of time we want to give some of these towing carriers to respond. Because the sooner we get that data, the better it's going to be for us to, again, sort through all this stuff. I do think we'd have to add a new portion, again, based on the legislation, to include maybe some questions about consensual tow rates for the carriers that do them. We'll need to include that as well, because again, if that's something they want us to be considering, or rather are requiring us to consider, we definitely want to make sure we get big chunks of that data as well.
Yeah, I think that's how we do this. We just do it the same, what they charge for consent, what they charge for non-consent.
Yeah, but also breaking it down into the different categories. Like, I don't think you can just ask a towing carrier, how much does it cost to run your business? No, I mean, we got to break it out to all these different data points. Insurance costs, and again, we can once we get that kind of data, we can then bounce it off of Jim Howes and say, does this look right to you? I mean, based on your expertise, does this look like accurate data? So.
Well, that's the thing. He can probably give you actual quotes.
Yep. But no, the more data we have and the sooner we get it, I think the better off our recommendations are going to end up being. All right. Well, does anybody have any issues with us approaching it that way? Like, it seemed to come, it seemed to result in some pretty robust recommendations, back in 2016. And again, I don't think the way it was approached back then was in any way flawed. I think we need updated information, because again, it's obviously things are a lot different economically, especially now, than they were back in 2016 or even 2015, when all this information was being gathered the first time around.
Right.
I hate to say it, but this is like the worst time to do this with all the drastic inflationary things we've seen lately. This is a terrible time to go through this kind of an exercise, but I mean, this is where we are, and so we got to use current data to come up with current recommendations. That's kind of the way it works.
Right.
It's unfortunate that right now is when we're doing it, when we're seeing some pretty historic things going on in the economy, but I mean, it can happen. So,
well, can I be frank with all of you?
always.
don't get offended if a couple fucks fall out of my mouth or something. Okay. I do honestly believe that this body should make a recommendation that the legislators change the rules, or PUC changes the rules to where I tried to do this with legislators. It didn't work. But it would be nice to have this body have the information we're looking for, right? Last time we did this, we're in the same boat here. We don't know how many trucks are on the road out there. So we got a tow truck plate to try to figure that out. So we can get numbers on tow trucks, but we can't get the numbers of which companies, right? So there's no separation between an A, B, C, D tower, right? There's no, in PUC, there's no clarification of what type of tower they are. I would love to see A, B, C, D style tower, one that does consent, non-consent, whatever, and have them categorized. Have the data that has to be shared with the PUC, so that way the task force has that information when they're doing this every year, saying, okay, we're seeing an increase here, we're seeing a decrease there. If we don't have the information, how do we do it? And if there's nothing in the rules or the law that mandates any towers to do anything, we're pissing up a pole. I mean, we really are. Every time we do this, we have to go out and we hunt and we get all the information ourselves. And I mean, really all I got's personal experience and some experience I have with other towers that I'm close to. But other than that, I couldn't tell you. So, I mean, I think that we should have a recommendation that kind of tightens up what we need to do our jobs here.
I don't disagree. Oh, sorry, Joanne. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say I agree with you, John. That would be really helpful information.
Yeah, I don't disagree either. I think it would be great to have that information. One thing I can tell you now is we don't currently collect that kind of information at the PUC level anyway. And I don't disagree that, we have all these standards in place at the PUC at the rule level that are basically like minimum standards. And let's face it, if you put minimum standards in the books, what are most people going to do? The minimum standard. And so that's, I mean, some people go above and beyond, and that's great. But, if you tell people the absolute least you have to do is this, that's what most people do. And we see it all across the board with all kinds of transportation that we regulate. We say at a minimum, you got to do this. Do they do beyond that? Sometimes, but mostly they do the minimum, and because that's what's required for them to do. So, something like that, having that kind of data included. I mean, I'd have to, look at the rules and see if that's something we could even put into the rules, where they'd have to, for example, disclose, maybe on an annual basis, the types of tows that they're performing. So, for example, because again, right now we don't. It doesn't matter if, in order to get their permit, that's not something we require that they disclose, because again, the permit covers basically any kind of tows that they want to do, and it's a statewide permit. So it doesn't even really matter where they're doing it. It's, you get one permit from the state that covers the whole state. So, if you had a towing carrier move from the Denver metro area and relocate their business down to Pueblo, for example, they can do that. All they got to do is update their, address and stuff with us. That's really all they have to do, because the permit allows them to operate anywhere in the state, as long as they're just performing intrastate tows. That's the distinction. So anyway, it's not something we currently require them to disclose, or data that we collect. That may be changing in the future, because obviously there's a lot of things going on these days where they want to collect new kinds of data for various purposes. So that's, I don't think it's a bad point that this is something that that the PUC could do it. All I can tell you is it's not something we currently do. And we'd have to explore if it's something we could even implement. I'm guessing it would probably take a rulemaking to change that to become a mandatory piece of information that we're collecting. Because again, while we can always ask them, and I do it all the time with towing carriers, and I get calls, and I say, "What's your business model like? Do you do mostly law enforcement order tows? Do you do? I mean, and they tell me, because I'm asking and I'm curious, and they don't have to tell me, but they usually do if I ask. But again, with something like this, where it's impacting policy and it's impacting rules, or could potentially impact those things. Again, I could see some carriers being hesitant to share it. Again, unless they view it as some kind of benefit to sharing it with the commission or with the towing task force, or again, if it's something that's required, then they'll probably share it, because again, it's required for them to do so. But anyway, Officer Prunski.
So with getting that information, it's just a thought, is why can't that all be added into when you get your permit? Like, when you're getting your permit, what kind of towing are you doing? Are you doing consensual? Are you doing non-consensual? Are you doing law enforcement? That's kind of information that we can ask just in getting your permit. So then that way the PUC has all that information and it's readily accessible. And then the yearly update, things change or addresses move when they're doing the update, if they moved or add trucks or whatever it is. I mean, you do the update and you can add that information, or if they change, maybe now they're doing only consensual.
Yeah, no, and thank you for that question. And that's actually the lens through which I was talking about potentially doing this. The thing is, again, we have certain statutes we have to adhere to that give us certain direction, and then that's what our rules do. Is for the most part they expand upon the statutory authority that we're given through CRS, and then it sometimes expands upon that. So, but we do outline, what people have to do to get a permit, and unless it's specified in there, sometimes we have to issue it if they meet just this minimum criteria. So, for example, our rule concerning tow carrier permits is under Rule 6503, and what it says is that they have to do three things. They have to pay an application fee, $150, cause to be filed the required proof of financial responsibility, so that's insurance, and pay the required annual fees, or if applicable, shall be in compliance with UCR agreement. So those are your stamps, your vehicle stamps that you put on your windshield for your vehicles, or if you're part of the UCR, Unified Carrier Registration Fund, if that's something you do, then you're actually exempt from the stamps. That's kind of how it works. So basically, if somebody comes and files an application and does those three things, there's also a background check that's required by statute that we do, and that's under Rule 6504. That outlines that process. But basically, if we have a towing carrier that comes and does all of those things, then we have to issue them a permit. I think if we were going to implement something like this, we were requiring additional pieces of information to be submitted. I don't know if it's as simple as just saying, "Oh, now you gotta submit this." It very well may require us to do a rulemaking to say, now you have to include this as well. Again, I'm not against the idea. I'm just saying I don't know if it's something we can do just on a whim. So I just wanted to make sure.
I think we could do it as an option.
What's that, John?
I think if you just had it as an option when they renew.
So almost like a voluntary disclosure.
Right.
I don't know. That's an interesting idea. Prunski, did you have any other things to add? Sorry, I thought you were
just in that, would that have to be through the legislature then in order to get all those changed, or?
No, I don't think so. Again, there are certain things in statute that basically give us, the commission, and the PUC guidance on kind of how to structure this kind of thing. But no, usually it's at the rule level. For something like this, it seems like it would be something at the rule level that we could do. But again, I'd have to explore that idea a little more to see if it's something we could just add in and say, oh, towing carriers, now if you file a new application or renew a current permit application, then you also have to submit this. I don't know if it's as easy as just changing it at the policy level. It very well may require us to do a rule change so that we have that to fall back on when we request that information. But again, I'd have to explore that a little more to know for sure.
Then the same thing with like DOT stuff. You got to update number of trucks, vehicles, stuff like that.
Well, and we kind of the amount of vehicles is not something we've really ever officially tracked. We do have some mechanisms in our rules that kind of allot for that. So like the purchase of stamps, for example, that if I'm ever looking at a particular carrier record in our databases, and I pull up a record and I want to get an idea for how many vehicles they have, I go to the tab that says how many stamps they have, how many stamps they purchased. That usually gives you a pretty good idea of how many vehicles they have. So if I see one where I see they've purchased 5 stamps at their last permit application period, I'm like, oh yeah, they probably have 5 vehicles. Or if it's 1, or if it's 20, whatever the case may be. Again, that's usually the best indicator to indicate how many vehicles a particular carrier has, and it helps us identify the larger carriers from the smaller ones. Right. Michael.
In identifying non-consensual towers too, can't we tap law enforcement or whoever is the agency to whom towers have to report a non-consensual tow? Because it seems like we can. I mean, that seems like a data source we could potentially tap. Is whoever's receiving reports of the non-consensual tows.
It would be all law enforcement agents. So we'd have to call every city law enforcement, every county law enforcement in the state to get that info. Because it's whatever area you tow from. That's who you have to contact.
Yeah, it's the local. Usually it's the local law. Oh yeah, sorry, Captain Dittman, go ahead.
So go ahead.
No, I'll let you guys finish that thought, because I'm not quite sure I understood
So
what Michael was recommending. So, but then there's overlap too, right? Because we'll just use John's business as an example. Tows for multiple law enforcement agencies in addition to the state patrol, and within different regions of the state patrol. So maybe I don't quite understand the question you're asking. So I started to mute again because I just wanted to hear the conversation develop a little bit more, make sure I understood what you were asking.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, the main thing I was trying to get at was just identifying those towing companies that are doing non-consensual tows just by tapping different the law enforcement agencies who they have to report to. And what I didn't quite know was the logistics of being able to pull that off, and so it sounds like that would be difficult because we'd have to get in touch with all of the local law enforcement agencies, which is a lot.
Yeah, and then you'd have to deconflict the ones, you could have Thornton PD and Westminster PD using the same tow company. I can tell you the state patrol, we have memorandums of agreement with about 170 tow companies throughout the state. So at least there's a jumping off point, I guess.
So what Michael was talking about is there's a statutory requirement under 42.4.2103 that requires towing carriers, if they're performing a non-consensual tow from private property, they are required within 30 minutes of that tow to notify essentially the local law enforcement jurisdiction. It's my understanding this requirement is so that if somebody comes out and their vehicle's gone, what's people's first inclination? My car was stolen. And so what do? They call law enforcement. And so that's, I think, the reason behind this requirement. The statute does require the law enforcement department to track that data. I think the issue there is that each law enforcement agency is probably going to do it differently. And so we're going to see a lot of very inconsistent data potentially. And like was mentioned earlier, you're going to see some overlap as well of, tow carriers that maybe operate in the Denver metro area. You're going to have to check with Aurora PD, Lakewood PD, what do you call it? Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, Arvada PD, Wheat Ridge PD. I mean, basically anybody operating in the Denver metro area, you're going to have to call all of them to have that data kind of make any sense.
But there's a problem with that. The problem is they don't record that data by company name. They report it by the case report number, because that's how the towers file within the state paperwork. So it's all done by case numbers. I'm sure they put that in there, but I don't think there's a way to track that by company.
Okay, and you might be right. I'm just kind of looking at the statute now, and it does say they have to, track the vehicle information and that kind of stuff. I believe I want to say the company name and the address, like of the storage facility of that towing company. I thought that needed to be in there too.
Yes, it
Um,
does.
just because, again, you're going to have, when they call law enforcement, that's what law enforcement responds with is, no, your vehicle hasn't been stolen. It's been towed. Here's the company's name. Here's their phone number. Here's their storage facility address. Good luck. I mean, that's my understanding of that kind of a conversation. Officer Prensky?
Yeah, and just on that, I know when they'll call into our dispatch and say that, they'll give company name, address of the lot where it is, and they'll add that vehicle information into our tow logs. As far as where those tow logs go, I'm not positive on that. Yeah, it goes through our dispatch, or where it's kept or everything else. I know, but I think it might get cleared out for each vehicle once that vehicle has been recovered.
And that very well may be the case. That maybe that's how a lot of law enforcement agencies do it. Maybe they keep track of it until they get that call or something, and then maybe maybe it's not kept for historical data. Maybe it's not. I don't know. And again, I'm sure each law enforcement agency probably does it a little bit differently. So trying to aggregating all that data would be stressful, to say the least. But then trying to combine it all and make sense of it, that just might be too difficult to try to do, for the value that could come from that.
Yeah, to clarify, I was thinking about just the really crude level data, which is just identifying carriers who are doing non-consensual tows. So not how many they're doing, or any more fine grained data, but just as a way of getting a good sense of which of the permitted towing companies are doing non-consensual tows. Yeah,
That would be awesome data.
yeah.
Well, and like I said, we're currently doing things, not just at the PUC, but at the department level for DORA, where we're kind of starting to wade into ideas for how to collect more different types of data that we've never really collected before and are currently not collecting. But again, we're having those conversations at the department level, the department-wide level, basically being spearheaded and initiated by our executive director's office. And again, some of this is based on legislation, some of it's, things that the department has come up with on their own, to again, kind of putting more, I guess I'm trying to think of how to explain it, but it's data that kind of can give us an idea of where, for transportation anyway, where the transportation regulations are, kind of what benefits they give to different communities, maybe down the line, based on the information we have or the information we're able to put together or information we may require carriers to submit in the future, maybe identifying areas that maybe, could be underserved, for example. These kinds of conversations come up, in regards to like taxi carriers, for example. It's obviously a lot more difficult to set up a system of regulations that can kind of entice certain to establish an operating area in rural areas, for example. That's a lot harder than just opening up a cab company in the downtown Denver, for example. So this is something, while it's still in the very early going in exploring this, there is a chance that based on this unrelated initiative, it could bring us to a place where the PUC might end up ultimately having more data down the line than we currently do. So again, just kind of giving it some silver lining for all the work we're doing, again, that's unrelated to the task force, but could down the line maybe help with the task force, in that some of that information we're currently not capturing may be something through that process that they want us to capture. So just FYI. All right. Anything else anybody wants to talk about? Michael,
Real quick, Nicole has logged off. Was she secretary? Was she taking minutes?
I think she said in the chat she would reference the video for the minutes.
Okay, gotcha. I see that. Okay, just checking.
Yeah, she's done that before, so she'll be able to put the minutes together based on the video after I post it. All right. Well, yeah, like I said, I do think, like I said, between now and the next meeting, I'll start doing a more thorough search of some of the commission's documentation. Again, I'm not sure how far back it goes, but I'll do a thorough scrub and see if I can pull up any kind of information that might be useful to this current iteration of the task force that maybe previous task forces have used, to kind of try to put some of these recommendations together. Again, whether it's spreadsheets that can kind of catalog the data once we get it. I'll see if maybe I can get my hands on whatever that notice is that went out. Maybe that's sitting in a folder somewhere that I can find, that we can then review and maybe update if we need to. But again, I do think we have to get that data as soon as possible, and cross our fingers for a positive return on the data coming back. It's if we just get 60 carriers out of 700 plus responding again, unfortunate, but at the very least it would be updated data from what 2016 yielded. So
Well, I can push on the association side to kind of get the word out to the industry. I know that they've been blowing my phone up over this bill that's going through there, but I mean, so a lot of them are at least coherent for the most part.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea, John, and thank you for providing that that opportunity, because obviously there are a lot of tow carriers that are part of TRPC, and basically, yeah, putting that word out and encouraging people to respond to such a request, that might be coming up. That's a great idea, and hopefully would create more responses, and more data that we can use. So yeah, that's a good idea.
Quick procedural question for John Roberts here. This is treading into the zone where I was really concerned about the ex parte restriction, because this is the kind of thing that I would want to be doing just with getting feedback from, say, mobile home park residents, that seemed to be the way we discussed it last time, seemed to be count as ex parte communications that would have to be done as a whole. So I'm just curious about the leeway we have, for example, with John and John's organization to put out the word that we're looking for this information, and what kinds of restraints or further reporting requirements would be part of that.
It was John's. Yeah. So if I can rephrase your question, what are the bumpers on what we can do in collecting this information?
Yeah. Without running afoul of the ex parte.
Yeah.
Aspect.
The legal bumpers. That's a technical term, by the way.
Okay.
So I think if we collect the information, if one source, like, I don't know, Nate being a DORA employee would, kind of stand out as the obvious person to me, as opposed to the chair. If Nate is the central collector on behalf of the organization and he collects it from all the sources that the task force is talking about, I don't see a problem with it. Where we'd run into a problem, Michael, is if you start talking to the mobile homeowners and John starts talking to his competitors and colleagues, and then we start funneling information to the task force kind of willy-nilly, which is also a technical term, then that's where we'll start to run afoul of ex parte. But if we have one person, like I said, probably a DORA employee being that administrator and coordinator of the information, I think that's fine.
So that includes both putting the word out that we're looking for this information, as well as collecting it.
Yeah, I believe so. It's like, you know, if one person does the soliciting and collecting and then, you know, publishing it to the task force, you know, it's again, it's going to be a public record, but I know that that's not your question. But I think we can avoid ex parte problems if we go that course. Nate, do you have a thought about that? You look like you want to say something.
Yeah, I do actually. So just because I would imagine if we're doing this way and we're gonna basically, we would have to pull that. The PUC is the only one who has that data, so that's where that data is going to come from. You know, particular active carrier email addresses that comes from us. That's nobody else has it, as far as I know. And so, or I mean, some people like, you know, at TRPC they might have, you know, a subset of that data for their members, and that's fine. But in regards to all active towing carriers in the state, we are the only ones who have that data, as far as I know. And so we can aggregate that, and we can create essentially a listserv where we can send out basically a mass email to all the active towing carriers in the state with a particular message. And we do this when we initiate rulemakings, for example. This is how we meet our notice requirements. So anyway, the notice would have to come from here. It would have to be something that is done basically kind of through the procedures of what the PUC does. I'm sure I'd have to clear that with a few people to make sure that was fine to do, but I can't imagine they would have trouble allowing us to do it that way. Because again, it's basically an administrative process that's being done through the department, specifically through the PUC, on behalf of the towing task force, which is a board that is overseen by the department. So I can't imagine that would be a problem. But the thing, what was I going to say?
Well, my question would
lost my
be,
train of thought there for a second.
if that information comes out from the PUC and I'm the president of the association, that's going to come to me and they're going to say, what do we do? And so as an organization, I would say support that and fill it out and get it back to them. Is that getting into our legal bumpers?
I don't think so, John. That's a good question, though.
Yeah, and that actually was how I was going to describe it as well. John just beat me to it. But yeah, no, I can't imagine if again this is being done as an administrative activity. Again, which I'm sure I would be part of that. You know, even though I'm a member of the task force, I also handle a lot of the administrative things associated with the task force in my role as a member of the department and with the PUC. You know, it's similar to how I'm managing you know, the compliance affidavits that everybody needs to submit and those types of tasks. So yeah, I wouldn't imagine it would be a big problem for Mr. Connolly in his role as the TRPC president to, you know, he would receive one of these notices as well. And again, if people come to him and say, hey, I got this notice, what do you think about it? He'd say, yeah, you know, it's probably in the interest of our group to respond to that, or, you know, it would be helpful if we submitted that information. That doesn't seem like it's overstepping to me personally. Okay. Well, yeah, I wish more people were here to talk about some of these issues. I think this was an important conversation for us to have, and I think we've kind of laid a little bit of groundwork for where we need to go. Like I said, I cannot stress enough how quickly we're going to have to move to get some of this data. I mean, if everyone feels as strongly as I do about getting some updated data, we could again use a similar process that they used you know, back in 2015 2016, which again, as John indicated, did end up being the basis for how the rates are currently laid out in rule, in regards to, you know, having different rates for different vehicles based on their weight, GVWR, and, you know, kind of splitting up different rates, like, you know, splitting up, you know, how the framework of rates for private property impounds are, you know, tows from private property as opposed to law enforcement ordered tows, which are usually come from public property. You know, splitting that up and recognizing the differences between the two. I think it's I think it's a good framework, and it obviously took a lot of work to put together, based on the backs of previous towing task force members who put that report together back in 2016. And so, I don't see any problem with using the same process, but just soliciting some new updated data, because obviously things have changed a lot in the last 7 years or so. So, I think it's a good plan. To do that, but like I said, I cannot stress enough how soon we're going to have to do that.
Well, something we could do, we could ramp up meetings as well. I mean, if we start getting into crunch time, we could do meetings twice a month or once a week. Or, I mean, there was a time where the task force met every Thursday for it seemed like forever. I think it felt like 6 months. I mean, we put a lot of time into that. So we could do that.
Yeah. And again, the more we don't have to start from scratch, the more data hopefully I'm able to find that we have here in some of our historical data from back in those days. I'm hoping I can stumble across some good pieces of documentation and data that we can then just use again. Obviously with updated data, but again, it seems like the process that was used was a thorough one and an effective one. And so again, we can always make tweaks to it, but I like the idea of, using the work that's already been done and just allotting for the fact that things are different now than they were 7 years ago.
Another thing that might help us get a head start on getting survey stuff out would be if we can get any kind of summary statistics that are available just from the permits that are already issued.
What kind of data are you thinking?
Well, for one, I'm thinking about the location of the business. We can get some kind of demographics from that. How many towers are in different areas, for example. And John had mentioned size. I don't know whether there's any data from permits that could be used to estimate company size. But I'm actually just at this point suggesting that that this is more of a hunt and peck kind of thing. Find out what the PUC has available to it that could be extracted as data to see what might be useful to us. I have no idea at this point what kinds of records have been kept that could be aggregated. But knowing that may just help us design the survey or how it's distributed, how it's weighted, things like that.
Yeah, that's something again that we typically use when we come up with these notices for like rulemakings or other proceedings that we need to send out a mass notice. Yeah, there's a way. We can't do it directly. We actually have to have our OIT department do it for us because it's data that kind of hides behind the wall, the technology wall. And so they essentially aggregate it for us in basically an Excel spreadsheet. And we filter it out based on, there's a lot of data in these documents. I've seen them before. And we basically just narrow it down to just what we need, which is usually like email addresses or physical addresses. But yeah, no, that kind of data, like geographical data, so like where the towing carriers have reported is their physical address, and maybe it's the same as their storage address. I'd have to look at one of those old spreadsheets and see if it includes storage addresses. But yeah, I mean that would be pretty easy. I feel like to aggregate that data and get an idea of like how many towing carriers are operating in different zip codes or different cities or whatever the case may be. That I would not imagine would be too difficult. And like I said, I can always check with our department reps and make sure that's something that we can share. I think we mostly just use it for internal purposes, but I've always kind of considered most of the data that's reported to the PUC to be public information anyway. So if somebody calls and says, hey, I'm trying to get a hold of such and such tow carrier, can you tell us what their phone number is? I mean, if they've reported a phone number to us, which they're all supposed to, then I'll just tell them what it is, because I mean it's public as far as I'm concerned. So anyway, that's I can't imagine that would be a problem to share that data. And again, there's a lot in there. So, there's a lot of potential data that maybe could be helpful. And again, if I'm given the okay to share it, I'm more than happy to do so. Joanne. Oh, you wrote in a question. In the
I
chat.
did, yeah. The question was, can the PUC set rates by region, or does it have to be statewide? And I'm not suggesting that we do that. I was just wondering if that was even legally permissible, if that's something the task force wanted to recommend, or the PUC came up with that independently.
So the only example of that that I've ever seen, so if we're talking about private property rates or private property impound rates, so non-consensual tows,
Right.
from private property, those are statewide rates, and it's basically whether you're operating out in Durango or you're operating just over here in Aurora, doesn't matter, same rate across the board. The only basically caveat to that is we do have a rule in regards to the mileage and fuel surcharge that towing carriers can apply to those types of tows, which basically states that if it's within 10 miles of either side of I-25, the towing carrier can apply, I think it's 12 miles to those particular types of non-consensual tows. If it's in excess of 10 miles on either side of I-25, you can expand that to 16.5 miles. Even if it takes you, so like imagine outlying areas and a tow carrier has to drive 30 miles to get to the location of the tow, and then another 30 miles back to dump it in their storage facility. They can charge a maximum of 16.5 miles and the accompanying fees that are assigned to that particular charge. But again, if it's more along the I-25 corridor, 10 miles on either side, which includes pretty much the whole Denver metro area, and I think even maybe a little beyond that, then it's 12 miles. So that's the only distinction I can think of where there's actually a different rate for depending on region, depending on geographical area where the tow is occurring. But that's the only one I can think of. Every other rate is exactly the same.
But I mean, right. So,
Yeah,
so I mean, to clarify my question, like, are our base rates statewide, like because of statute or rule? I mean, like, if the PUC wanted to set regional like base rates, could they do that? Or by statute, are we required to have the same rates, across the
Yeah.
the state?
Yeah, I understand what you mean. Yeah, I don't know that there's any prohibition against doing that. I think just the rates have traditionally been uniform statewide.
Okay.
There are some fluctuations that could be possible. So for example, for law enforcement ordered tows, it's not a flat rate. So it's not like you're going to say, oh, I have to travel, a whole bunch of miles to get to, a post-crash law enforcement ordered tow. I've been, called by State Patrol and, they called me out and it's 30 miles from my storage facility. So I got to drive 30 miles to get it. For law enforcement ordered tows, again, the framework is different than a regular PPI, which is a flat rate for the hook fee. Instead, it's an hourly charge. And so just inherently, the farther you go, the more time it's going to take, which means the more hours you can apply to that particular tow fee. So anyway, there are some fluctuations in there in certain instances, but no, I don't know that there's any specific statutory prohibition or anything about adjusting rates based on region. I don't know that that's ever been explored before. Maybe John knows a little bit more about that than I do. Historically, I'm not aware that that's been explored. Maybe it has, and it just was before my time. But anyway, John, did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, it has been explored.
Okay.
It was a nightmare. The reason the 12 miles was put in was to not kill the honest tower, but to stop the crook. What we found was we had towers that were up in Boulder, towing cars from Boulder, and their storage facility was in Colorado Springs. And so they were charging mileage from Boulder to Colorado Springs. Same thing, Boulder to Denver. And so that's where we pushed as the industry to get the mileage cap on there. The problem is it hurts the person in the rural area where they got to go 30 to 40 miles to get a private property tow. So that's where, those towers have to make deals with the property owners and have them cover the differences. So that's kind of where that went in. That's when legislators try to drop the drop fee. They didn't understand that, the tower that drives 50 miles, he's got costs. But, here again, that's just not understanding the industry. But yeah, back to your question, it was a nightmare. Like, okay, where do you cut that off at? When you look at like Adams County, trying to figure out where the cutoffs are in counties and city limits, or it was just a nightmare. And then the hardest part of that nightmare was the regulators. So PUC trying to figure out, okay, was this tow done in this county or that county, and is it a violation? And then there's too many gray areas to stop the bad actors, too many gray holes.
Yeah, that was what I was about to say. Is I'm thinking through that kind of a scenario where all of a sudden it's broken out maybe by county or by, maybe you split the state into quarters. I don't know how you would do that, but yeah, no, from an enforcement standpoint, as a former investigator, oh my gosh, that would be quite difficult to try to work a particular case, and that's just another layer of complication that the investigator would have to deal with. So yeah, no, I would echo John's comments there, at least from an enforcement perspective. Michael?
Yeah, we would everything to like people per capita, cities, counties. We did explore all of that.
Well,
And that's good
so
to know.
so
Even like when we look at like the consumer price index or other like economic measures are usually, they're contained to a geographical index. And I was wondering if that ever been explored, even if it were just like rural versus metro, because obviously those costs are going to be different. And I also would think that the volume would differ as well, but I'm not even suggesting we make that recommendation. I wanted to know if one was a restriction on that, and if there had been any history. But that's good feedback.
If I may, there is a way that can parcel out different regions of the state somewhat reasonably, and that's what has come out of the Affordable Housing Task Force and some of their reports. They distinguish between different counties that are, I believe, urban and rural, and I forget the name of it, but the other one is basically the high cost rural areas like Aspen, Snowmass, and so on, where property values are out the roof. And so they distinguish between those three regions as distinct economies, and specifically for them, they have different housing related costs. And so because of that, and because I think land value in those areas would probably make a significant difference for towers. In terms of their storage costs, that might be useful, because it also seems to piggyback on distance of towing kinds of issues as well. If you're in an urban county, you should expect the distance to be relatively short. If you're in a rural or one of the mountain communities, then maybe a different distance measure would be appropriate. But yeah. So that's just a thought as to trying to think through how to do this, and one way that we could piggyback off of existing distinctions of regions in the state without having to do the work ourselves.
Well, and I would like us all to keep in mind when we're looking at things like that, you have to, how do I put this politically correct? I don't even know a way to put it politically correct. How do we stop the crooks, right? I've been fighting this fight for decades. And if you leave any gray area in anything, you will find guys that will exploit that. Any gray area. So we have to be very careful of, if anything, on recommendations and thought process. We have to concentrate regulation on our regulators to say, how can they enforce this, and is there any way they can screw the system? All right. I have seen towers screw the system for decades, right? And it's very hard to shut them down once we open up a gray area. So, I mean, it's great information, and that's the other thing is there is definitely a drastic cost increase to certain areas in the state that took it in the shorts on what the task force gave for recommendations on prices. I mean, they took it hard in the shorts, and there's some that benefited from it. But here again, we had to shut some down that were just in left field. They were on a different planet. I mean, they were charging people $2,500, $3,500 to have a car towed. All right. It took us 4 to 6 years to shut 3 companies down by closing loopholes in the system. And so when we're doing this, I really want everyone to keep that in mind, that we have to watch our gray areas and make sure we do not open up gray areas, kind of like this bill did. This last bill that just went through, it opened up gray areas that we had shut, but and we'll see the effects of that here in the next year or two, guaranteed. But just food for thought there.
Thanks, John. All right. Well, we're coming up on 4 o'clock. Is there anything else anybody wants to discuss? I still have not seen our individual who signed up for public comment come in at any point during this meeting, which is unfortunate. I was kind of looking forward to seeing what they wanted to say. But I don't know, maybe they'll submit something written for the next meeting that we can read, or I don't know. We'll see. But that's unfortunate that they did not show up at any point during the meeting, because that would have been nice to hear from a member of the public. We haven't heard from one in a while, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, is there anything else anybody wanted to talk about before we wrap up? No?
Not just
Okay.
happy Sine Die to all who celebrate.
Sorry, what was that?
I said happy Sine Die to all who celebrate the last day of session.
Oh, okay, for legislation?
Yeah, I was making a
Okay.
terrible joke.
Okay, is that Latin?
Yeah, apparently. But it's the final day of session, and apparently they have to gavel out by 8:10.
8:10. That's interesting. Not 8:10. It's got to be 8:10.
Yeah, I think
I'll celebrate that.
All right, fair enough. Okay. Well, thanks everybody for showing up. Like I said, it's a little disappointing we didn't have more participation today, but yeah, that's I guess this is going to happen sometimes. But yeah, I do think, even if we get that statutory extension for that report, we do still have a lot of work ahead of us. Feel free to do, I guess like I said, what I'll do in the background between now and our next meeting, which, let's see, I'm guessing if we stay on track for what we've been doing, that will be, hold on. That would be the 8th, I believe. Because yeah, I think the second Tuesday of the month is what we've been doing. So that would be June 8th. Unless somebody has a different idea. that's what it looks like from my part.
I'm on vacation that day, so I won't make that one.
Okay. And just remember, everybody, that if you can't make a meeting, you can always designate somebody to come in your stead. If it's somebody you think would represent you well in a meeting like this, feel free to do that. Just shoot me an email beforehand and let me know, just so we know it's coming, and I can invite whoever that person is. The statutory availability for that is very loose, and so I don't know if there's any specific criteria for when you do that. Like I said, just as a personal favor, I'd appreciate you letting me know beforehand, just again, so I can invite whoever that person is to the meeting, so that they can make sure and join in, and also just so we know that that's going to happen, would be appreciated. So I wish people did that more if they weren't going to make a meeting. So anyway. All right. Well, thanks everybody for participating, and yeah, like I said, I'll do a lot. I'll do as much as I can between now and that next meeting on the 8th. Again, 8th June 8th, which is 4 weeks from today, from 2 to 4 regular scheduled time. And I'll send out an invite for that probably no later than next week. But yeah, I'll do a lot of background and see what data I can pull up from the previous towing task force. And hopefully that'll be helpful to us. But yeah, I do think that next meeting, we're going to have to put together exactly what we would theoretically send out in a notice, because we have to get that out absolutely as soon as possible so that we can get that data and we have plenty of time to review it and make those recommendations by the deadline. And again, this is assuming we get the extension. We're still looking at less than 7 months, which is going to go by like that. I feel like this first 5 months has gone by like that. So yeah,
I think if we can get that document that we had in the cloud, where we can just take the current numbers that we have from now and put them in that document, and that'll give us a pretty clear cut direction.
Yeah, I'm really hoping to find that. Like I said, I'll work with my boss and see if we can locate that. Especially if it was in the cloud, I would imagine we can find it somewhere.
Is Ron Jack still around?
He retired over 3 years ago now. I want to say it was in, oh geez. Actually, it might have been late 2018 now that I'm thinking about it. Yeah, it was either late 2018 or early 2019. So it's been well over 3 years since he retired. So yeah, I mean, maybe so. I mean, I'll ask around and see if I can.
I'll start searching my cloud and see if I can find it.
Okay.
I thought it was in a Dropbox cloud something.
Ooh, thank you for telling me that, because we do have Dropbox. I don't use it a lot, but thank you for saying that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it was something like a Dropbox cloud. That's been 2016, so I've slept since then. I forgot.
Okay.
I know that we lost access to it once the task force shut down.
So Nate, before I leave, I was hoping to ask about the affidavit, because I haven't signed it, in part just because the conflict of interest section.
Okay.
I recall getting training on open records, on open meetings stuff and ex parte. But outside of that, I don't recall getting any instructions on conflict of interest and identifying them and dealing with them. So I was curious if I missed something, or whether what I just mentioned was the extent of that.
Yeah, it was in the training. So that was on the very first meeting we had.
Right.
We had that about hour-long Attorney General training, which was done by one of our commission counsel, Ruthie Harper. And it was in there. That particular section was in there along with ex parte and Cora and open meetings law and all those. It was one of the sections. I did circulate that training. I got the okay from the presenter to go ahead and circulate that PowerPoint presentation afterwards, which I did. So that would have been, I don't know if you want to go back and check your email from, it would have been probably very late January, maybe early February when I sent that. So if you want to go look, and again, this is back when we were unfortunately still using our personal emails. So if you want to go back and take a look and see if you can find it, I'm happy to resend it to you if that's helpful. But yeah, no, conflict of interest was in there.
Yeah. Okay. I was just curious, because I don't recall getting it, but I also joined that meeting late, so it's possible that section occurred before I got onto the meeting.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, we dove in pretty quick to the training. I think it was like the first thing we did. But yeah, I'd have to look at the spreadsheet and see where that particular topic was addressed in like the order of the slides. But yeah, I would probably, if you want, like I said, if you want to go back and look and see when I circulated that training presentation, yeah, I would go and take a look at that. And again, if you see it there, maybe that's enough to make you comfortable to sign the compliance affidavit. Hopefully that's enough for you. But yeah, you can always let me know if you want me to resend it to you. I'm happy to do that.
Okay. Yeah, I should be able to find it easy enough.
Okay. Yeah, if you can't find it, just shoot me an email and let me know, and I'll resend it to you.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right.
See you
Thanks.
guys.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks. See y'all.